Hey everyone, welcome to Nex-Tech University's Tech Talk today. Mark St. Peter here with Nex-Tech. We're going to be covering disaster recovery and the CryptoLocker era. And with me today, I've got Michael DePalma from Datto. Hey Michael, how you doing?
Hey Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing great. So just a little bit intro here before we kick things off. Like I said, Mark here with Nex-Tech, sales supervisor, and thought, topic today would just be a good discussion kind of on, we say CryptoLocker, but, a little bit on ransomware, kind of go through some detail there and maybe some ideas for how you can mitigate that. So, Michael, you want to give us a little update on Datto and kind of what you got going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Mike DePalma. I'm one of the channel development managers here at Datto. For those of you watching at your desks, if you're not familiar with Datto, we're a business continuity solution provider out of Norwalk, Connecticut. So we're about 40 miles east of Manhattan. We have 2 data centers, protect about 200 petabytes of data. So if you're not familiar how big that is, you can Google petabytes. It's a lot of data. So we've got data centers in Reading, Pennsylvania, and Salt Lake City, Utah. So a lot of my role is to try to travel the country and do a lot of these type of presentations, both to the industry and to end users as well. So yeah, we've got a lot of ransomware statistics to go over today.
Awesome, Mike. So just to kick things off, here's a little bit on the agenda, what we thought we'd cover. Number one, what is ransomware? Kind of talking a little bit about that. How do we get it? How can we prevent it? And if we do get it, how can we recover from it? And so those are just kind of a few things that we wanted to hit. So really just starting off with what is ransomware. It's basically, malware that gets infected on your machine, prevents or limits users from accessing their systems, encrypting files, locking users out, those types of things. I kind of threw a little chart up here on the side that just shows from December to May, what's really affecting those networks. And Mike, I see Tesla Crypt here is 42%. There's some other ones on there. Is there any difference in what the different types are, or they pretty much they just do the same things?
So, I mean, at the end of the day, the end game is always the same, right? They're just trying to encrypt your data. They're not trying to steal your data. They don't really care about your data. They just want to find out how much it's worth to you. So they're just trying to take it for ransom and say, we'll give you the encryption key back if you pay us some money. So it's just really how they're going about stealing the data. We see a lot of them. I mean, you've got a bunch of the examples up there. You do typically hear people just call all of it CryptoLocker, even though that's just one of the variants. That was the first one to be very prominent. But we see Locky is very big on a very massive scale. Torrent Locker. A lot of times they'll try to also steal your address books so that they're now branching out and then sending out emails that look like they're coming from you to your coworkers or friends or other vendors that you're working with. So it's really just a different approach to how they're trying to lock up that data.
And so, they call it ransomware and obviously holding data for ransom. So I know here at Nex-Tech we've seen, residential customers, business customers, pretty much everybody across the board has experienced experiences. Maybe they haven't been affected, but I know they've gotten an email and maybe hadn't clicked on that link. So if, obviously there may be the only way to get your data back is to pay that ransom. Have you had any experience on it from the Datto side where it's been a positive or a negative? I know with paying the ransom, you're always opening yourselves up to giving that extra information out, whether it's credit card information and things like that. Have you guys seen anything on your end as well?
So yeah, a lot of times what's unique about these guys that are doing this ransomware is they're not asking for a ton of money, right? Which is why they have such a high success rate of people just paying the ransom. Most times it's between $500 and $1,000 to get your data back. And so as a business owner, you're doing the math in your head and saying, well, I can go recover my data from whatever my backup solution is, but it might take me 2 days. The cost of being down for 2 days is going to be more than the $1,000. I'm just going to pay it. Typically, they're requiring that you do it through Bitcoin, so it's completely untraceable. And interestingly enough, when it first started coming to prominence back in I think around 2013, the FBI actually recommended that you just pay it because there was not a lot of ways to avoid it. It was going to be more cost effective. They've since changed their tune on that, and we can get into some of the other alerts that have been coming out from the FBI. But essentially, what a business continuity solution like Datto allows you to do, because we could take an image base of your entire system, right? So everything that lived on that server or that workstation that we're protecting lives on this device, and then also in our bicoastal data centers, we have everything that lives on there, and each one of our backups are completely independent of one another. What CryptoLocker really relies on is the fact that you have a traditional backup system where they're all relying upon older backups, which means once they have that encryption in there, they've locked up and seized all your data. With a business continuity solution with independent backups, you can just roll back to your last clean backup and be back up and running. You're just going to wipe out that infection. So that's really the key. I mean, we see on a daily, probably hourly basis, calls coming in with variants of ransomware. It's probably the biggest thing that's hitting the IT industry right now. So it's very prevalent.
Yeah, I know we see it all the time. This is crazy, but I know it's a big business. It's a big industry right now. There's a lot of money being made in ransomware. So, that's definitely where the industry's going. So, you kind of hit on, how do you get infected with ransomware? How are they deploying this? And I listed a few up here. The biggest one we see is through an email, whether it's a link or an attachment, a spam message. They're going out and spoofing, your CEO's email or even your IT director or something like that. Any information that they can find, very social engineering centric. They're going out and capturing that information, using that to create emails to entice you to click on those links that then infect your systems. Other things, removable drives, bundled with other software. I think that's a big one. Anytime you're going out on the web, you're downloading software, there's always those pop-ups that, hey, you're downloading this. Do you want to download this and add this add-on? And there's all those other things. Mike, is that kind of similar to what you guys are seeing on your end as well? Just those types of situations of how the infections are happening?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the days of getting the email from your long-lost uncle where they say, hey, give me $1,000 and I'll give you $1 million, those days are behind us because now we're all caught up to that. So
right.
Now these attackers, they're like you said, they're using social engineering. You're going to get an email that looks like it's from either a vendor that you're working with or your CEO saying, I need you to open up this invoice and check into it. Or you're seeing, they'll know you have a Netflix account. You'll get an email that looks like it came from Netflix, says we need you to update your password. When in fact the hyperlink in there is not to Netflix, it's to this malicious site. FedEx is another big one. It looks like you have a shipping package that needs your attention. Can you click on this link to check on the status of your shipment? How many of these emails do you get a day in your daily life at your office? You don't think to look at it. It looks so similar to what a normal FedEx email would look like. So those are still the traditional ways they're going after. It's just that they're so hidden that it's so easy to just look past it and say, it looks like a normal email, let me click on this link. We do see also just instances of corrupt, like USB sticks, where, we've actually done at Datto a little social experiment. We do a lot of these industry events. We hand out, we hire somebody from, looks like they're from another company, handing out these USB sticks. And you see people in the IT industry taking these USB sticks and just saying, oh, it's a free USB stick, I'll take this back. And then in the middle of my presentation, I'll say, hey, I have another video I want to show you. I didn't have time to put it in my presentation. I threw it on this USB stick. I'll hand it to somebody else at Datto and say, hey, can you run it in the back and plug it in? And the next screen, it looks like they're opening up a file, and then that CryptoLocker ransomware screen pops up, and everybody in the room realizes they just fell for it, and they're there to learn about these type of things. So it's a lot of creative ways, and we use that as just a tool to say, hey, look, this is how easy it is to get infected. There's so many creative ways, and the money is so easy for these people to make. That's why it's so prevalent.
I think the funny thing is there's just so much in the technology world being done with those removable drives, and probably one of the most interesting things I find is, I go to tech conferences all the time, and it never fails. Everybody's always giving out, thumb drives, or, they're throwing presentations on thumb drives. And gosh, how easy would it be for somebody to go in there and, grab a thumb drive, corrupt the data on it, put their software on there and drop it on the ground somewhere, and they're being picked up and plugged in. It happens all the time. So definitely a key there. So we talk about getting the infections, so obviously the next step is how to prevent it. And I know you kind of touched on that business continuity plan as kind of the next piece of this, of once we get it, how do we recover from it. So obviously we need to have that antivirus solution, looking at anti-malware, anti-spam, just to try to block, mitigate, and do everything you can to keep your internal network protected from the outside. But patching is another big one, just keeping everything up to date, making sure that your Adobes, your Windows, your WinZips, whatever those things are, keeping all that software up to date. And then, like we just talked about, avoiding those links and attachments. Probably the biggest thing, and Mike, you probably agree with me on this, is that user education and training. I think the biggest area of concern is just those people clicking on those links or those attachments. Would you agree with that, Mike?
Of incidences of ransomware, and one of the interesting statistics that just came out last month, we did a survey of about 600 managed service providers, and of the folks that got hit with the ransomware, only 15% of them had even basic level security training. So that's like one of the biggest, you put in all of these different things in place, but training is still ultimately the most important thing. Just having people understand that this is out there. You might have heard of ransomware, read one article, but to understand this, the size of the problem, and understand just some simple things like you mentioned that you should be doing, trying to just avoid getting it in the first place is definitely the most important thing.
And we've even, just here at Nex-Tech, we obviously try to help our clients out as well with education and training. And there's companies out there, and there's a lot of different tools and systems, but a lot of those types of things are sending those spoofed emails, capturing the data, who clicks on what links and what attachments, and then taking that information back to the customer and reviewing that and providing training for some of those types of people. I think it can be really eye-opening, just a type of cybersecurity awareness of who's clicking on what, why, and showing them, here's the data, here's some education behind it, and some training of, how you can look at these emails and know what's real or what's not. And if you don't know, things that we do here at Nex-Tech is, send it to your IT administrator or your IT person, so that way they can review that or open that up in a safe environment and make sure it's legitimate or not legitimate before it gets spread throughout the network.
Yeah, absolutely. Even here at Datto, we're guilty of it. Everybody's guilty of kind of letting their guard down a little bit. And we're constantly getting, updates from our ops team about suspicious things that are kind of circulating through the network and all those type of things. So no matter what industry you're in, it's something you really do have to be vigilant about, because they'll attack anyone,
Yep, definitely. So now we'll kind of transition back into, all right, somebody clicked on that link, we infected the network. What are some steps that we can do to recover from it? And obviously, you kind of touched on it before, making sure you have that good backup. So, if something happens, you can go back to a point in time where, prior to the infection, and recover from that. But I know, just working with Datto for as long as we have, and just kind of the industry, there's so much talk about backup, but I think the change in the industry and that transition is more of what you talked about earlier. It's the disaster recovery planning and the continuity piece, not just the backup piece, but continuity.
Your shift in the industry altogether has been, for years and years, backup was just seen as something that you need in case of a disaster, right? In case I need a second copy of my data in case there's a fire or a flood or one of these type of things. When in reality, the instances of those is a very small percentage of actual downtime. So what business continuity tries to strive to do is to keep your downtime at a minimum, right? Or to eliminate it altogether. And so, like I mentioned, the way we're taking a base image of your entire environment, everything that lives on that, whether it's a workstation or a server, the operating system, applications, and everything, taking that base image and then taking these incremental backups from then on in. that gives you the ability to virtualize, and that's what you mean by when we're talking about business continuity. It's not really just about being able to recover your data. It's about being able to keep your business up and running if something were to happen to your data, right? So it ties in perfectly with ransomware. In fact, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security just put out an alert earlier in July, basically specifically about ransomware, just different threats. They kind of go into what's out there, but their number one recommendation is to employ a proper backup and disaster recovery solution, which is essentially what we're getting at here with a business continuity solution. So the ability to virtualize that device and say, well, even if as we're repairing the server or whatever we have to do, we can go to a virtual instance of that server and keep everybody working there, tied into that data, and the ability to just roll back to the last clean backup because they're all independent of one another, it prevents that data loss. So it's really twofold. It's really reducing the amount of downtime by getting you back up and running, and it's also reducing the amount of data lost by having them all independent of one another, but also making it an automated system instead of relying on user interference there, possible user error with your backups.
The cool thing is just, disaster recovery planning is really the customization piece. And, we talk about in kind of the industry terms, what are those objectives that you have? And I think it's really important, as, the customer, the end users, when you're doing that planning is to sit down and evaluate your recovery time objectives, your recovery point objectives. And I know, Datto had a great solution for that as well. And just really going through and figuring out, how, from a time perspective, is how quick we need to recover. From a recovery point is, how much data can we afford to lose? And finding that balance of where you're comfortable in, for the price it's going to take to get to that standpoint. So I think those are definitely key topics. Mike, do you have anything you want to add or inject into that?
Presentations is the recovery point objective, recovery time objective aspect of things, trying to reduce both of those things. When you tie it back into ransomware, at the end of the day, the fear was that folks wanted to hack into your data to use that data for some malicious act. But now they're realizing that just the act of holding it for ransom or just keeping you down is enough to make you pay money. So it's really their understanding, I don't really care what your data is. I just know that it's very valuable to you, which allows them to go after everybody because everybody now is so tied into their data and is so reliant upon being up and running. So the prevalence of ransomware, and you see the increase of it at quarter by quarter, you see the numbers going up. It's really a testament to the fact that people can no longer absorb being down, and they can't absorb to be away from their data or lose any of their data for any extended period of time.
That's a great point. And so touching in on it's the backup, it's the continuity, and that's really that recovery piece. And it becomes so important. And I think a lot of times it's easy just to we're backing up, but I think that next step and that next piece is kind of my last bullet point. Are you testing those backups? Are you simulating a recovery? It may not necessarily have to be in a live environment. I'm not saying go in and unplug your data center and bring it back up at your remote location, or and those may be things that is important to business to do. And if that's part of your plan, then you definitely should be doing that. So, Mike, how do you guys kind of take that plan and put it to the true test?
Yeah, so we have what's called screenshot verification. So it's an automated way to test your backups. You could set the schedule. The most common schedule is at the end of every business day. We're going to test each one of those backups, make sure that it's valid. You're going to get an email verification that says, here's the boot screen. It's a valid backup. Because that's a key component as well. A lot of times, no matter what you're using, if you're not testing those backups, you don't know that they're valid backups until disaster strikes, and then you just have your fingers crossed. So a really key component to any business continuity solution is to be able to validate on a regular basis that these backups are valid, right? So we have that automated system. We also encourage quarterly full, DR testing. You can do that in a sandbox environment, but to do a full test of everything to make sure that all the systems are operating in that environment as well in a virtualized state. So it's a very key component to be able to have that Just that peace of mind. You know, every day when you leave work, yes, my backups are valid. You're not relying on some person to do it through an external hard drive or whatever they're doing, or tape. And you don't have to come pay somebody to come test it every time because you're getting that email verification. It's a very, very big component to business continuity.
You're testing, even looking at both sides of the house. You're testing that local backup and that local copy, as well as, if you're have a secondary location, if you're out in the cloud, things like that. You want to make sure you're testing all areas of that.
Yeah, and that's why even in addition to the daily alerts you're going to get saying that the backup is valid. And on the second point is that if, in case something is wrong, at least and you're proactively not notified of that, and you could do something to correct it. But that's why we still encourage the quarterly full DR test. Even if it's not quarterly, as long as a couple times a year or at least annually, to go and look and make sure that we virtualize every system's going to be working, and it's good for the office to know what it looks like when you're in that environment as well. So that's another. It's part of the education process. It's more part of just being prepared so that when it happens, and at this point with the prevalence of all these things, it's more of like when it does happen instead of if it happens. You want to be prepared.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a key point, and we talk about it all the time, and we try to do different events where we bring the FBI in and things like that. And that's, I know every time we've had a presentation with the FBI, that's always their message is, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And another one they like to say is, it's not when they get in your network, they're already there. It's just what are you doing, and how are you keeping them, at a minimum capacity. So I think all good stuff. We kind of got through a lot of the topics we wanted to touch on today. Mike, is there anything we missed, anything that you want to add, or anything you could think of?
Presentations where the FBI presents as well, and I think that I have a doom and gloom type presentation. Wait till you hear the FBI talk about it.
Oh yeah, totally.
I'm like Rosie when it compares to them. So they really understand the importance of all this.
Yeah, I always leave their presentations and I go home and I'm like, oh, Avery, we need to do this. We need to do that. We need to shut our internet off. Oh, they always scare the heck out of you. So, if anybody has any questions, well, feel free to take those. I'm not seeing anything on the chat window right now. I'll put some contact info up here for me here at Nex-Tech, and our relationship here through Datto. So if you have any questions or want some more information or anything like that, definitely please reach out to us. We can get the right people involved, help answer your questions, help with planning, business continuity, all that type of stuff. So appreciate your time on the webinar today. Mike, thanks for joining us. Appreciate all the input that you had, and hope everybody has a good rest of the day.
users as well. So yeah, we've got a lot of
on Datto and kind of what you got going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Mike DePalma. I'm one of the channel development managers here at Datto. For those of you watching at your desks, if you're not familiar with Datto, we're a business continuity solution provider out of Norwalk, Connecticut. So we're about 40 miles east of Manhattan. We have 2 data centers, protect about 200 petabytes of data. So if you're not familiar how big that is, you can Google petabytes. It's a lot of data. So we've got data centers in Reading, Pennsylvania, and Salt Lake City, Utah. So a lot of my role is to try to travel the country and do a lot of these type of presentations, both to the industry and to end users as well. So yeah, we've got a lot of ransomware statistics to go over today.
Awesome, Mike. So just to kick,
He is very big, and they've locked up and seized all. You're seeing, they'll know you have a Netflix account.
just to try to block, mitigate, and do everything
But to understand
that usually for somebody to go in there and grab a thumb drive, corrupt the data on it, put their software on there, and drop it on the ground, zips, whatever those things are.
thing.
And we've even, just here at Nex-Tech, we, obviously try to help our clients out as well with education or training. And there's companies out there, and there's a lot of different tools and systems, but